What is going on? My name is Nick Hanna and I'm a pro natural bodybuilder. So welcome back to the YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to run through exactly the different stages of a competition prep, from start to finish and everything in between. Everything from the training, the nutrition, the output, the cardio, the mindset. What do you need to consider before you start a contest prep and the different stages within that? So with that being said, let me show you exactly how to bring your best physique to stage. So kicking off, we want to start with the pre-prep foundation. Ultimately, you want to be in the best position possible to start the prep to set yourself up for success. What does that look like? So there's a few different things that I would want to tick off the checklist before you start the competition prep. So firstly, let's talk about body composition. You want to be in a relatively decent body composition. I mean, you can't be so far out of shape where you're having to lose 30, 40 kilos in a contest prep. Now that's just, too much. Now, pro tip, you should be obviously liaising with your coach. You should be mapping out a timeline with respect to ensuring that you're not having to lose, substantial amount of weight in a competition prep. Of course, around the sort of 15-ish to 20 kilo mark is probably on the upper end of the threshold in terms of what I would advise someone in terms of what kind of weight loss you'd want to achieve in a contest prep. So, a good eye, a good coach, or, someone who is in the bodybuilding space, I'd be more than happy if you message me to say, hey, how far from stage condition do you think I am? Drop me a message. I've got a decent eye in terms of being able to look at someone and say, hey, you're probably a little bit out of shape. You probably shouldn't be starting a contest prep. Then leading on to your training. At the start of a contest prep, you should be in the strongest position possible. You should be hitting PRs every time you hit the gym. Is it your leg train, is it your pull train, is it your push train, all of it should be in sort of uncharted territory and the strongest that you've ever been in your training career. This ultimately sets yourself up for success from the get-go in terms of your training and forms a really good platform. In terms of nutrition, you should ultimately probably be eating the most food possible. Obviously within reason, you obviously don't want to be putting on excess body fat before the prep has started, but ultimately the higher your calories are at the peak of your off season or just before you start the prep, the easier it is going to be, at the start of the competition prep, because you're not going to have to, totally drop your calories, substantially at that start of the competition prep, because you're up so high. So a little minor drop as a percentage of what you were eating isn't going to be as major. Additionally, you want to be in a super healthy spot, obviously, as us naturals, before you even start your competition prep. So my suggestion, get your blood work done before you even start your prep. There's various markers to go through. I won't go in depth now as to what we're looking for, but ultimately get your bloods done to make sure you're in a healthy spot before you start your competition prep, because if you're not, then your body potentially won't respond as you enter the prep. Obviously, we've then just spoken about sort of your training, your nutrition, your sort of health element. Let's think about sort of how your life is externally to bodybuilding. What's your family life like? What's your financial position like? Are you stable in all of those elements? So, do you have a stable job where you've got a stable income which can support your competition prep? Those are all super important. Do you have a supportive family? Do you have a supportive partner, friends, family? All of that combined is very, very important before you even start the competition prep. I go in depth on that in my comp prep guide, which I'll plug now and I'll plug throughout, but I go in depth on all of these various topics. Super useful when it comes to things to consider before you even start the prep. All right, so we've determined that we're in a really good spot to start our competition prep. I'm a big advocate at the start of a contest preparation to be quite aggressive, to be truthful. I know a lot of people are of the frame of mind that, you want to ease into the prep, make it, relatively easy to start. But ultimately, you're at your highest body fat, you've got the most energy availability. Why not go super hard and aggressive at the start? From my mind, I think, being aggressive at the start to, get a fair chunk of the body fat off initially in the first sort of 8 to 10 week period is super advantageous and beneficial for a lot of people. What this might look like is, dropping body weight at about 1% of body weight for that first sort of 8 to 10 weeks. Quite aggressive in terms of your initial calorie drop, in terms of the calories that you're eating, the food that you're eating. Your step count, you might slowly titrate that up. You might be adding cardio into the regime or, upping that cardio output. to ultimately create a further calorie deficit to elicit a calorie drop over the first sort of 8 to 10 week period. In this first phase of a contest prep, it probably actually shouldn't feel like a contest prep, to be truthful. Energy levels still should be quite high. You've just come off hopefully a long stint in the off season whereby, hunger levels aren't that high. You're eating lots, you're training super heavy. So in that first 8 to 10 weeks, you should be still able to socialize, spend time with friends and family. Energy levels should be in a really good spot. So I shouldn't expect hunger levels. Sure, you might get a little bit hungry here and there, but nothing compared to what it should be later on in the contest prep. So something that I'm a big advocate for throughout a contest prep, particularly if you are, managing your timeline appropriately, is incorporating deloads, devolume, diet break periods throughout a contest prep. So you can almost segment your prep up. So maybe the first sort of 8 to 10 week block might be 1% of body weight that you lose. You might then take a week off. I say week off, but you might just bump up calories a bit, be it maintenance calories, reduce maybe some output in terms of cardio, in terms of your training, to really refresh yourself up for that next stint, which leads on into that middle phase of a prep, whereby, you're already in pretty good shape. A few people around the gym are saying to you, hey, are you competing soon? You're looking in pretty good shape. You might have, significant detail through your, whether it's your upper body, your lower body, your midsection's nice and tight. You got some veins running through your abs, but you're not contest lean. Yeah, let's be honest. You're probably more like a diet kind of lean, lean for the general population, but not truly fucking shredded. You're probably going to pull back in terms of rate of loss. So that might, instead of being 1% rate of loss, it might come down to sort of 0.75 or so. So you're definitely going to pull back in terms of rate of loss. So as you can see, at the start, being more aggressive, and we slowly titrate that down. As and when energy drops, body fat levels drop, of course we want to conserve that energy and conserve that rate of loss, because ultimately throughout the contest prep, if we can slow down that rate of loss throughout, it gives us a better chance to retain the muscle tissue that we work so hard for in the off season. You'll probably get to that point in this sort of phase where you're like, oh, I'm a bit draggy, a bit prep draggy, and you think, oh, energy levels are dipping. All of a sudden, maybe your sleep's struggling, maybe your training output may not be quite as good as it previously was. Hunger levels continue to build, but ultimately this is where you've formed that discipline. That'll trump the motivation any day of the week. You form the routine, the discipline, the patterns that you've created throughout the prep so far. You're probably at least 16 weeks into the diet phase right at this point, in this middle phase once you've completed it. So you should have everything down to a T, down pat. I always say this to all of my clients: if you can nail down your routine, you're just on autopilot daily. Autopilot, you can keep going. You don't even have to think. You just know that this day I just need to tick all of these boxes. And as Hunter Labrada would say, just win the day. So the middle stage or the middle phase is done, and we enter the final stretch. So we go from lean to shredded to fucking shredded. Yeah, we do. So this is probably where we'll actually see the lowest amount of rate of loss. This might drop back to maybe 0.5% of your body weight. I know for mine, I probably didn't lose that much weight in the past or the last, sort of 12-ish weeks of my competition prep. It might have only been, maybe 2-3 kilos, if that, give or take. And we just refine the look. We just, more time in the diet, more time in the deficit, it's gonna etch out those details. That's where the glute lines come in. Sure, I might have been like quote unquote lean from 12 weeks out, but that wasn't stage lean. Under those shining lights, under those tan, that wasn't going to cut it. Really, really wasn't. Now this is where the hunger, the energy levels, all of that are going to play its role. You thought you were hungry 12 weeks ago? No. This last phase, this will be what sets apart the people that are just going to compete to the champions who are going to win shows and step on stage in unbelievable conditioning. It also might be a good opportunity, particularly if you're ready early, to potentially increase food, decrease cardio output, and just put your body and yourself in a really good position. Manage that fatigue, because that ultimately is going to reflect a better look on stage. A tired, under-recovered physique doesn't quite look the best on stage. So the more that we can refresh the physique, bring it back to life, alleviate some of that fatigue, bring out those lines in the quads, and mean that you're not having to do 20,000 steps all the way up until show day, Ultimately, that's what we want to do. The closer we get to show, that's the goal. Reduce inflammation, reduce fatigue, bring that physique back to life and bring our best to stage. Obviously in the lead up, in this last phase, the things that we're thinking about is nailing down our posing, or even our posing routine for that matter, practicing that daily, practicing our posing rounds daily, holding those poses so you can stand up on stage and be an absolute statue. Think Nick Walker, 2021 Arnold Classic, be an absolute statue on stage, whereby regardless of how many rounds you do, you're there and you're the person that is looking sharp and staying in their poses for as long as possible. You'll obviously have your peak week strategies, and this is not the video that I'm going to go into depth on that. You're obviously going to have your plan leading up to the show day, the last few days, and how do you peak those protocols. So that is ultimately, that's another video in itself, and I could go on for hours about peaking protocols and strategies, but ultimately that's where you put your plan in place with your coach to ensure that you can bring your best physique to stage. I will give one tip on this. I always think, people in the peaking strategies try and overcomplicate things and trying to throw a bloody Hail Mary at what might happen in the lead up to, stage. It should be a rinse and repeat. If you're looking good in the lead up to the show, the week leading up, the weeks leading up, it's just a repetition of that. You're gonna look good, so let's just repeat the same process. Even the day before, the days before, you should just be repeating the same process, particularly, in preparation for stepping on stage. The final step is that show day. It's one of those days where you build it up, the journey, the different phases of prep from start to finish. It could be a long process. It could be 20, 30 weeks plus in order to get into the best shape of your life. It can be nervous, it can be nerve-wracking, particularly if it's your first time stepping on stage. But all I can say, and the biggest advice that I would say, and I'm not going to go into huge depths of show day itself, is be present. Enjoy the day, because I tell you what, it'll be over before you know it. You might only be on stage for 15 minutes. You've been prepping for 30 weeks and you might only be on stage for 15 minutes. Just think about that. And you might be done by 11 in the morning, and then it's all like, oh, we're done. And it's quite an adrenaline, dump after that to know that, you've stepped off stage, that's done, everything's gone from there. Obviously you might have other shows in mind, but all I would say is be present, go make some friends backstage, because I think this health and fitness, space is an unbelievable space, an industry and a community that's been formed. Everyone's lovely, and it's just love. But it's just love all across the board, and shooting the shit with other competitors is always one of my favorite things. And I still talk to people who I competed against in 2017, and sort of nostalgic feeling knowing that, we competed all those years ago together. Hopefully this video has given you a bit of a clearer picture to show you what it takes from the gym floor to stepping under those lights on show day. Of course, if you do have any questions, please let me know. Feel free to send me a message on Instagram at NickHannahFit, or even click the link down in the description or the bio description of this YouTube video with my stage ready guide. I'd be more than happy to send it across with a bit more information. Again, I'm just trying to help people to bring their best to stage. That's what I love, and that's what I'm ultimately trying to put forward and make natural bodybuilding great again. So with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.